All right, guys, welcome back to Southeastern 14. Blake Lovell here with Max Barr, back talking SEC basketball, and we promise you guys our power ranking tiers here as we, are in the summer. We think transfers are finished up, but not quite. With full disclosure, we recorded this once already, and that was before Trey Mitchell committed to Kentucky, and obviously there's been more movement recently with Javon Quinterly transferring from Alabama and such. So we decided to do this over just to kind of update you. But in all honesty, we're probably not going to be able to update this every day because there's still roster movement, as we'll talk about in the SEC. But for now, Max, we're going to try our best to kind of look at our power ranking tiers and kind of group some of these teams together. And we'll both have different tiers to talk about it. But should be a fun exercise here as we look at all 14 teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I know people want to see these power rankings. I mean, college basketball in late June. Come on, college basketball in late June. There's nothing better.
Yeah, nothing better. When you're trying to figure out what to do with 14 teams who have had a ton of roster movement. And
Ton.
yeah, we're gonna try to do that here. So I think these tiers are evolving as I look at them and we go to kind of discuss them. And so I think it's gonna make it really difficult. We've done this, like I said, another time, and there's a team I keep going back to that I kind of have in this tier. I'm not even going to number them just yet, but I'm going to say kind of the lower tier because I just feel like that they have more of a ceiling, and that's South Carolina. And they're the team that I feel like at this point, again, we've kind of discussed this a couple times. I don't know that there's another team that I kind of put in this same range right now, and that's not to knock South Carolina. I just think that they probably are still the team with the. I don't know. We've talked about it before. Like Lamont Pierce, I think just started further behind in terms of where South Carolina was. We expected them to have, some struggles last season. They certainly did. And I feel like the roster has gotten better this offseason, but I still feel like they're probably another year away from getting things exactly where they want it to be, just from the foundation of probably what Lamont Pierce wants to see with his team moving forward. So I think they could still be improved, but the problem is we're going to keep talking about throughout this, Max. You got to put them ahead of somebody, and you have to move someone else down. And I don't know if there's a lot of choices right now for teams that I could sort of move down here with South Carolina. And so I think I kind of put them. I've made the decision, Max. I've kind of put them alone here for now because, like, I think I'm going to move a couple of these other teams up that I had kind of in this range, but that's not to knock South Carolina. I just think that, in all honesty, I feel like the teams that we're going to talk about in a second, and people can probably, do the math and figure out who I'm talking about here. I feel like they've probably done a little bit more in the offseason in terms of just completely overhauling their roster to feel a little more optimistic about them getting out of this, maybe, the Wednesday night, playing games in the SEC tournament. Somebody's going to be playing there, but I feel like these other teams I'm going to talk about in a minute have probably moved beyond that. So I'm sorry, South Carolina fans. I'm not picking on your team. I just think that, to me, like, they're where I would start probably if I'm starting, at 14. If I had to pick a number 14 right now, I would probably pick South Carolina.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you. I got South Carolina slated on the bottom too, but that's not because I think they're an awful team. I think they actually improved from last year's roster. I think
Yeah.
they brought in a few decent guys. But I think other SEC teams brought in better guys. That's kind of all it is. It's just I think this team finished 221st last year in KenPom. Do I think they're that bad this year? No, but do I think they're gonna take a leap enough to jump these other teams who I think also improve? It's hard to put them
Yeah.
in front of everybody. Um, and the team I actually have right in front of this team is LSU. And I have a little note next to LSU. This team is too talented to finish dead last.
Yeah.
They obviously did not pan out in SEC play last year. Kind of started out hot, fell apart towards the later half of the season, but they brought in some real players here that can be proven in the SEC. Damian Collins could take a jump. Jordan Wright, we saw not carry Vanderbilt, but really be a big piece for Vanderbilt there down the stretch. So I just is this team gonna go from bottom to first? Probably not. I'd have some questions about Matt McMahon. He's gotta prove it for me this year, but this roster is just way too talented to finish dead bottom of a conference, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think so too. And that's kind of like I would have LSU's in this next tier. I'm kind of like rename this on the fly. To me, these are like the breakout type teams, teams that you could see really sort of make that surge. up, and I'm going to include Vanderbilt in here too because I know it's like, well, Vanderbilt made the surge last year, but I still think for me, you know, there's some unknowns, right? Like you could see, things perhaps not go perfectly for Vanderbilt, but you could also see them do what they did last year, where maybe they start slow and they just get better, but they have and look, I'm not saying I would have Vanderbilt at 13. Again, I'm just kind of grouping these as tiers. So I'm just going to put them in here with these teams. But when you think about Ezra Manjon, getting Tyron Lawrence back, that was one of the biggest moves of the offseason, I think, for anybody. And so when you add that combination to the young guys they're bringing back from last season that really developed, can they take a jump forward as sophomores? And then, you've got some other young guys, freshmen that are coming in, and we've seen before um, with Jerry Stackhouse, I think that staff does a good job of developing their young players. And so it's just a matter of keeping them there. And, they've got, I think a trio of transfers coming in elsewhere too. And so if you combine all those guys together, I think you're starting to get to the point where you give Jerry Stackhouse the benefit of the doubt that they're going to figure it out, even if you see a Jordan Wright leave, even if there's no Liam Robbins. So I've kind of got them in this teams that will honestly probably be picked lower in the SEC, but are potential like breakout type teams. So I'm going to put Vanderbilt in here with the group that includes LSU. You just mentioned them. I think getting Jordan Wright, which we just talked about, I feel like, it's kind of that situation where I mean, to me, he was just a huge part of what Vanderbilt did last season. And we kind of saw the impact he had on them. And now going to a team like LSU that just needs to win. I mean, Jordan Wright became a win. Like they were beating everybody at the end of the season, as we know. So I think that experience, just having someone like that, is big. But it's also having Jalen Cook. It's having Damian Collins, who we've all talked about, just kind of you could see what the talent is when he was at Kentucky. And now you put him on this LSU team where I think the role probably fits him better than it did at Kentucky. And so, and other guys coming in too that should be able to help them. So I think LSU, I would be shocked if they finish last. There's no reason they should finish last this season. And if they do, that will obviously put some pressure on Matt McMahon. But so I think I put LSU in this group. I'm going to put Georgia in here too, although I think Georgia's probably on the higher end of this. I would it's funny because like I would like to say that I would just be surprised if Georgia finishes in the bottom four. But at the same time, again, I look at what's ahead of them and I'm like, Georgia could be significantly better, but does it equal that many more wins? That's what I don't know yet. And so, you're going to talk, I know you mentioned in a second, but like top 15 recruiting class, look at the guys they're bringing in. Look at the transfers they brought in. Noah Thomason from Niagara, a 20 point per game scorer. They've got guys like Jalen DeLoach coming in from VCU. They've got a couple guys back, that were a big part of that rotation last season. And so, how do they look offensively? I think is an interesting question right now because you do lose your top couple scores, but in a certain sense, it does kind of give you an opportunity to really revamp everything. And I think the roster that they have, you've got what I think I'm looking at it now. They've got 8 or 9 new players, I think, on this roster. So um, Mike White, I've always said I feel like was just the right man for the job here. And so I think when you look at Georgia, LSU, Vanderbilt, I don't know that I'm projecting them to be bottom 4 teams in the SEC, but to me, they are kind of the breakout type tier where I could see all these teams, taking a big jump. It's just a matter of how does it all come together and can they eclipse these teams that have pretty outstanding rosters that are ahead of them, kind of, right there in that maybe next tier of teams.
Yeah, you guys are going to start to notice a trend with Blake and I's picks of how we end everyone with, well, I wish we could move them up a
Right.
little bit higher. You know, I have this next group also. I kind of have like they're not at that, they could take that next jump, but I just am having a hard time putting them ahead of these other teams. I have
Yeah.
3 teams in this group, and that's Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Georgia. And it's like I'm looking at Vanderbilt with a number 12 next to it, and I'm like, this team is better than number 12. This backcourt is legit and it's proven. That's one thing that is just like gold in today's transfer portal day and age. You get 2 guys that you know what you're gonna get within Ezra Manjon and Tyron Lawrence. Um, the front court is a bit of a question mark, but I think that this staff is one of the most underrated staffs in the SEC as far as development and whatnot. You saw it last year. So I have Vanderbilt down here at 12, but man, it just does not feel good to have them this low could really see this team performing a lot better, but I just don't know who they're going to beat. Um,
Yeah.
and then Missouri, I'm a little bit lower than consensus on this team. They had a great year last year, but the main reason why is just that loss of Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge. I know they brought in some solid guys. Caleb Grill was a nice piece for Iowa State. John Tanji was a nice piece in the Mountain West. You got Tamar Bates and Vanover, some good rim protection, but they were at a top 10 offense in the country with the 180th defense. Does that defense maybe get a little bit better with the rim protection? Probably improves a little bit. But are they going to have the top 10 offense again? I would highly doubt it. Um, Finished fourth, tied for fourth in conference last year, and I can't see them holding on to that. So I do think some regression is due here for Missouri, but I mean, still, it's a solid team with a good coach. They're not going to be a bad team. I just think they're going to regress a little bit from last year. And then to kind of top, you kind of mentioned this with Georgia, kind of at the higher end of this tier. Great recruiting class, obviously, and I think this is going to be a really good defensive team.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of might be like Mississippi State-ish of last year, where they're really good on defense, but like I don't know where the outside scoring is going to come from. The spacing might be a little shoddy at times, but you kind of know what you're going to get with a Mike White coach team. Got his feet in the door last year at Georgia. Now he's got his guys. Are they going to bump out of the bottom four? I don't know who they're going to jump, but
Yeah.
I do think that out of the bottom teams, this is a really one of the more no holes in this squad really, except for maybe shooting.
Yeah, and I think that ties in the Missouri part of the conversation because they were such a good shooting team last season, and
Right.
I have Missouri probably as the again, if I ranked them in the next tier of teams, I'd have Missouri probably at the bottom. And I'm giving everyone knows I'm giving Dennis Gates the benefit of the doubt when it comes to figuring it out. And anyone that's watched our channel knows that my Dennis Gates love knows no bounds here, but. I think when you look at it, yes, like there were a lot of things that had to come together for them to have a 25 win season. And some of those things are not there anymore. There's no Kobe Brown, there's no Demoy Hodge, who not just helped them from a shooting standpoint and offensively, but he was also a big reason why they're one of the best in the country at forcing turnovers. And so, they were not a great defensive team last season. They were not a great rebounding team. And that's putting it lightly in a couple of those cases because they had their issues. And like you said, I'm curious to see how they fix things from a defensive standpoint, from a rebounding standpoint, but also how do they pick up the slack offensively of the guys that they lost? Because they have a lot of good players coming in, but there's probably not a Kobe Brown coming in. There's not a Demoy Hodge in this group of guys that is coming in. And so it's really, getting a Nick Honor back to kind of lead the show a bit at point guard, getting a Noah Carter back who we know can really just be kind of a breakout offensive guy. How does Sean East continue to develop his game, and then getting a Tanjay coming in and all those guys and really seeing how they fit into what they want to do. I think Tamar Bates is one of the more intriguing ones for me because I'm curious to see, they're going to use him differently than they did in Indiana. It's a different type of play. And so how does that kind of mesh with the way his game is? And so I think Missouri is one of the more intriguing teams. I know I'm not just saying that for my Dennis Gates love, but I don't really, I'd probably say Missouri is the team that I would have. If you had to say, all right, pick your top two or three teams that are the hardest to place, I'd probably put Missouri in there because last year has to matter in a sense that we probably said some of the same things about them last year. Like I just don't know if they're going to be able to move above some of these teams, but they did, and so they figured it out. But I don't know if the shooting's going to be as good, and I'm just curious to see if they can fix some of those defensive issues. So I do have Missouri in this next kind of tier of teams for me, and in all honesty, this next tier is it's pretty loaded, and I may honestly, you know what? Now that I think about it, Max, I mean, I may just kind of leave Missouri in a tier of its own, and just kind of call them maybe the ultimate wild card for me because I think that's probably fair. Whereas if I look at these next group of teams that I have, as you know, it's a jumbled mess of teams that I'm like, I just don't know how I can separate a lot of these teams. And so here's what I'm going to do. So we're both not just, talking about the same thing each time. Like I'm going to give you the teams that I have sort of in this tier, this next group, and you can start wherever you want on some of these teams. But, this is where I have Florida. This is where I have Mississippi State, A&M, Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky, and then I've got Ole Miss, and I'll maybe start at the top here. And I know there are two fan bases that haven't heard their team's name called, and there's a reason why, because I've got them ahead of the pack. But I think Ole Miss right now, if you had to ask me to do a 1 through 14, which I think is really impossible, if I assume that Ole Miss is going to have everyone on the floor that waivers are approved and people two-time transfers, like if guys are playing, I would have Ole Miss at number 3 in the SEC right now, behind the two teams that I have at the top, and that's just a, a matter of what the roster has become. So I think Ole Miss probably tops this tier to me, but you think about, and I'll let you kind of speak on Kentucky and Alabama because I think they're two of the most fascinating teams. But in A&M, they're not going anywhere. They get Wade Taylor back. They get some of those guys back. They're a big part of what they did. So I can't move them down. Auburn, I think, is going to be better shooting wise. They get their entire front court back. Janai Broome is a Player of the Year candidate, maybe the one of the favorites to start off with here. But it also may be Tolu Smith, who's back at Mississippi State. So I can't move them down any. And then Florida's completely revamped the roster. So this is a wild group of teams here, but I don't know that there's a ton right now for me that separates some of these teams, and I could see, quite honestly, all of them making a case for being a top 3 type team in the SEC.
Yeah, this is where it starts to get a little muddy.
Yeah.
I think there's a clear separation at the top. We both have, I think everyone who's watching knows who the two teams at the top are. We'll get to those later. But from Alabama, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, shuffle them kind of any way you want. I could see the argument for all of them to be in any place. I really could.
Yeah.
I'll get to Ole Miss in a little bit. You say you love your Dennis Gates. I love a Chris Beard defense. I love those holding a team to 48 points. I just love it. But I'll start with Alabama. I think they're kind of towards the bottom of this middle pack, if you will. And that's just because I think the defense is going to regress a lot. They had a top 3 defense in the country last year, and a big reason why was height and depth. They had a 6'9" phenom at the 3, and then a 6'10" Noah Clowney at the 4, and then one of the best shot blockers in the country in Charles Bediako at the 5. So that's a ton of length and athleticism. It was so hard to get inside on this team. The matchups, yeah, they go to their bench, and now here's 6'10" Noah Gurley. It was just, there was no rest on the defensive side of the ball. And now you look at this year's squad, probably going to be looking at Nick Pringle playing a lot of the minutes in the front court. If I'm assuming Grant Nelson comes, so Grant Nelson, but he's more of an offensive guy than a defensive guy. Could definitely get a few blocks here and there, but he's no Bediako. And then you're probably looking at like Rylan Griffin or Estrada at the 3. And while they're very, very good players, they're not Brandon Miller defensively. They're not 6'9", 6'10". So this team finished 4th in KenPom last year. They had the 20th offense and the 4th defense. So they had very good shot creators and shot makers. And then on defense, they just swallowed up teams. Do I think they'll be probably around 20th offense again? Is this a nice offense? Yeah, I think this will be a top 20 offense. Is this going to be a top 3 defense? I don't think even close. So for that reason, I think the offense can be great. It's going to be a very fun team to watch, but I don't think they're going to be able to defend teams. And so for that reason, I have them kind of towards the bottom of this tier. I want to hear your take on Alabama.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, Charles Bediako. The reason those guys aren't there is because they're all in the NBA. Like they're going to be playing at the next level, and in most instances, probably making significant contributions. And so defensively, that's what I said. Everybody, we fall in love with the offense. The offense is the sexy part, right? But it's the defense is why Alabama was as good as they were last year. It wasn't their offense; it was their defense. And that is why they wound up being the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. That was it. Not to say that they're. I mean, they weren't a great shooting team. That's the thing is you think about it, they've shot the ball okay, but that's what we talk about with Alabama, right? It's the Nate Oates offensive style. It's just it's so attractive. But if you look at the success that Alabama's had, if you take last season and 2021 season, what was the common denominator? They were a top 3 defensive team. And so I don't think they're going to be as good defensively. You can't be when you're removing just those guys, and that's not a knock on the guys they have coming in or coming back. They're just not the same team defensively, and so you have to make that up somewhere. And I think that's going to have to come on the offensive end, which they could. They got a lot of good offensive players, but I'm with you. I just don't know defensively that they're going to be able to get there. I wouldn't expect that because I think you're probably setting yourself up to be disappointed because I don't see it because I don't see some of those guys on the roster that were a big part of that. So
Yeah. And then this next team that I have, I hate again with Vanderbilt. It kills me to have them that low. This team, it kills me to have them towards the bottom of this middle tier, and that's Mississippi State.
yeah,
Uh, I I don't know what Chris Jans, is doing. I can't really say much bad about him. This team, as you have said in past videos, was abysmal beyond the 3-point line. I mean, awful. And they add a little bit of shooting with Andrew Taylor from Marshall. He should be a little bit better beyond the 3-point line than Shaquille Moore was, but I still think shooting is going to be a major issue. But this team has like grown men. That's the one thing that's like jumping out to me when I look at this roster. If they still start Cameron Matthews, which I think they will at the 3, if they don't, they have some really good JUCO guys coming in. But Cameron Matthews, DJ Jeffries, and Tolu Smith, like those are all like big, strong guys. This
yeah.
defense is still going to be really good. They had the 9th defense in the country last year. I don't see it moving anywhere. I don't think they get worse on defense at all. Bring back pretty much anywhere, and I think Tolu Smith. I'll let you take the reins with Tolu Smith. We both love him here.
Well, I mean, look, like I said, I think he is easily one of the front runners for SEC Player of the Year heading into next season. I mean, I think you could put Broom in there, and there's some other guys I'm going to forget, Vescovy, which we'll talk about, and guys like that. But I think Toulouse Smith would probably be 1 or 2 for me right now in terms of SEC Player of the Year heading into next season. Like you said, the thing about Mississippi State is I think they'll be just as good defensively. I agree with you on that. The thing is, like, they were in all these games, right? Like, how many games did Mississippi State get blown out in last year, if anyone remembers? I think they only got blown out in a couple games. One of those was the game they played at Tennessee, where they just couldn't score offensively. And you're going to notice a theme here. The game against Alabama in the SEC tournament, they just couldn't score. But their defense kept them in every other game pretty much that they played in last season. And if they just hit, that's what we say. If they just hit 2 3-pointers, not even one, like
Yeah.
just give me 2 threes, like that could have been the difference in them winning 5 more games or something, right? And so if they can just improve their shooting just a little bit, and let's keep in mind too, they're one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the country. So their shooting just has to improve if they're going to take that jump from being a team that can get to the play-in round of the NCAA tournament or whatever, the first 4. And yes, they still finished, what was that, 10th or whatever in the conference, 9th. I don't remember what it was with the tiebreakers, but I still feel like they have a lot of upward momentum just getting Toulouse Smith back. And that's why, and let me say this too, I think in KenPom last year, they were 82nd in experience. In terms of age, this will be one of the oldest teams in the SEC, if not the oldest team in the SEC, because they have a lot of old guys, a lot of seniors that are there. You're adding, I don't know if grad wise, I can't keep up with that kind of stuff, but you've still got JUCO guys coming in, right? That are juniors and those kind of things. So this is going to be one of the oldest teams out there, and that's all we talked about is experience. So I think Mississippi State to me is the sleeper team because if they can just improve their shooting, I could absolutely see them. I'm not saying they're going to win the league, but I think I could see them finishing in the top 4, top 5 of the SEC because I think that the defense is going to be fantastic. They're going to be able to win ugly games. And Ole Miss might be an example of that too, which we'll talk about. They may have to do that too, but I just think if they can just improve a little bit shooting wise, they're going to be hard to handle. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if we kind of see a Texas A&M season for Mississippi State this year, kind of
could be.
where you have to go play at Mississippi State, and it's like you're going to be favored to lose every game, like just because of how that defense is going to swarm you and how good potential SEC Player of the Year is at home. I really like Mississippi State, and it just pains me to have them this low.
Yeah.
But right above Mississippi State, I think Mississippi State and Alabama are kind of in like a got some question marks, but could be good tier. Right above them, I have 2 teams that I cannot separate, and that's Kentucky and Auburn. And I'll talk about Kentucky a little bit first. We actually, Blake had mentioned we had recorded this once before, and Kentucky was our complete wild card. We had no clue where to pin this team. We were like, if they add Trey Mitchell, we'll bump them up. If they don't, I don't know. Well, obviously, they had Trey Mitchell. This is his fourth college team. He has had a terrible run of coaches leaving after his first year there, but uh, he's not going to be a difference maker as for rim protection, but he is a viable offensive option in the front court that I think just has a little bit more safety than starting on Yenso after he only, played a few games. I know he's projected to go first round in the NBA draft next year, but Trey Mitchell's proven. We know what we're going to get from him. He's played at Texas, played at West Virginia, some high major competition. And then getting back Reeves, I think, is huge. Everyone knows this freshman class is great. It might be a little bit of a down year for freshmen, but I mean, whatever. This is going to be a great freshman class. Edwards is going to be a star. Bradshaw is going to play. I don't think he's not. He's going to play. He'll be fine. Um, but I mean, rewind 2 weeks ago, had no clue if Reeves was coming. There was no Mitchell. It looked like this team might start 5 freshmen, and everyone was panicking. And I kind of like the way this rounded out a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, the reason we redid this video is because of Trey Mitchell. And so if you don't think what our impact or what we think his impact could be, there you go, right there. I mean, we we decided to redo this because it does change, I think, Kentucky's prospect for the season. That's all we were talking about. Is if they didn't get Reeves back, let's say they didn't get a Mitchell. I mean, this is a team that has sophomores and freshmen. And you've got basically two guys on the roster that have played in college if without those two guys. And so, but now that you add Reeves back into the mix, now that you add Mitchell, it gives them what they need. They need a shooter and they need a proven post guy, and they've got both of them. And so, yes, it's huge. I think Onyenso is going to he's going to keep taking a step forward. Everybody knows I was really high on him last year in the limited minutes he had. Just kind of he's got some of those things you just can't teach in terms of the athleticism, the length, those kind of things. And so, yeah, I think now, assuming Bradshaw comes back, he's exactly the player we think he's going to be. It doesn't seem like there's any reason to be concerned right now. But you add all those freshmen to the mix with the experience of those guys. Is Kentucky still going to be young overall? Absolutely. They're still going to be younger than a lot of teams out there. But I think just having those two guys on the floor, Reeves and Mitchell, who may have to play 35 plus minutes sometimes, and I don't know that they will because they got enough options elsewhere. But when it comes to crunch time, like you probably need those guys in there, just given their their history and the experience that they have. So I would expect them to be two of the five players on the floor a lot when they get into some of those close game situations with 10 minutes left in the game or whatever. So yes, that changes your expectations, I think, of Kentucky, and that's why to me I would move them up quite a bit, just based on kind of in this tier of teams that I don't know how to separate. They're going to be on the higher end of that right now, just given the talent I mean, come on, the talent is there. It's just how do the pieces all come together? And I think that's always a question we have when Cal completely flips the roster. We had those questions 10 years ago, when he just brought in freshman after freshman. It's just how does the chemistry? That's your first question you're going to have. If it's there, if these guys mesh well together, there's no reason Kentucky can't win the SEC. It's just the talent's there without question.
Yeah, it's hard to find a more talented roster. It's just going to be about how things gel.
Yeah,
I have a hard time separating Auburn from Kentucky, but I do have Auburn just a tad higher just because they're a little bit older. And I really like the front court. I don't think everyone knows how good Janai Broom is, but we've talked about him quite a bit. Probably going to average somewhere near a double double. He
yeah,
had, I think, 11 double doubles last year. So Janai Broom is really good, but I think Jalen Williams is one of the most underrated players in the SEC. Just last night, I was rewatching Auburn against Houston, March Madness, and Jalen Williams was the best player on the floor for Auburn. He was guarding Jarris Walker for the whole first half, was leading Auburn in scoring at the end of the first half, and then gets 3-4 fouls in the second half, and that's when Houston started to pull away. But Jalen Williams at 6'8" and can take his man off the dribble offensively, guard the best front court player defensively with Janai Broom rim protecting. That is a very, very good front court. And they have Dylan Cardwell coming off the bench. I mean, he would be starting most teams in America. So, not going to spend too much time on Auburn. You covered them pretty well. But yeah, 32nd and Ken Palm last year. I don't see how they get worse.
No,
Um,
I mean, look, the Denver Jones addition to me is important because, like, I think the Bruce Pearl teams we're used to, and it hasn't always been that way, but like, we remember the Jared Harper and the Bryce Browns just, slinging up
yeah,
threes and all that. Like, I don't think this team's going to be that. And we haven't, that was a unique team, and we know they got to the Final Four. There's a reason for it, but Auburn just they were another team that had their shooting woes last year, like a lot of teams in the SEC. And I think Denver Jones will be able to help that. Can't sleep on Aiden Holloway too, a guy who can shoot it coming in as a freshman. I think he'll have to, certainly be able to play a role there too. But I think Denver Jones' ability just to score the ball will really help because there's not a Wendell Green on the roster. We know he kind of had to take over and make some things happen last season, but this should be a team that runs a lot through that front court group. And yeah, I'm with you. Everybody on the channel knows we've always talked about Jalen Williams, one of the more underrated players in the league. So yeah, I think Auburn, finished what 21-13 last season, 10-8 in the SEC. I mean, they could be just as good. They could be better. I don't know how many more wins that means, but it's a tough league, and so I think Auburn is not going to go down. I think that, again, that's the problem, right? Is we can't move them down. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
yeah, I don't know who they jump in front of them, but they definitely don't go down.
Yeah,
They might finish 10-8 again, but they're just going to be a better 10-8 team.
no,
This team definitely does not get worse. And then a team I'm really high on is Florida. A little bit of a disappointment last year. I know a lot of people had high hopes for Golden in his first year, but he had some shooting problems. Castleton had a little bit of some issues midway through the season. Golden brought in shooting galore. I mean, Walter Clayton, you're not going to hear the end of Walter Clayton from me. In conference last year, shot 46% from three. And just an absolute sniper. I think Riley Kugel is an absolute stud. He's my pick for like breakout player of the year. I think he could really average like 17 points a game, up there near 20 points a game. Will Richard does not get talked about enough on the wing. Another 40% 3-point shooter. Um, Last year, they finished 74th in KenPom, but it was very skewed. 139th offense, 31st defense. Castleton was a big reason why. He had a great rim protection, and you bring in Micah Hanlokton, who's 7'1". Is he going to be Castleton? Maybe not at Castleton, but he'll be able to protect the rim. And Tyree Samuel is proven in the Big East. So is this going to be the 139th offense? No way. This offense is going to get a lot better. Is it going to be the 31st defense? Probably somewhere around there. It's probably going to be a top 40 offense and defense. And I just don't know how you're going to stop this team offensively with all the shooting they have.
yeah. Riley Kugel again was someone we talked about towards the end of the last season. He just like he can be the guy. Like he's a stud, and I think now you see him a year older can do a lot of things there, and just all the guys you mentioned that they're bringing into the mix. I think you have to be impressed, and it's always the coaches. It's not just going out and getting players; it's going out and getting the players to address the areas that you need, and that's exactly what Todd Golden did, and that's why we ranked him as high as we did, and we did our transfer ranking several weeks ago for SEC teams because I feel like they went out and got exactly what they needed. Is there a Colin Castleton on the roster? No, but can some of those guys kind of combine together to pick up the slack? Yes. Like I think they're talented enough to do that. And so, yeah, an older team too. I think that was something else. They went out and got some older guys that have played minutes. And yeah, I mean, you've got a pretty good nucleus here, and Florida is definitely one of those teams that I think can, I would be disappointed if they did not take a big jump. That's a 16-17 team last season. They were disappointed. I know it was his first year, but I know that there was disappointment there because they expected more in year one, and now I think they have a chance to really take that big jump. If I was a Florida fan, I'd be disappointed if they are not in the NCAA tournament this upcoming season, no doubt.
100%. Yeah, this should be a tournament team, most definitely. Um, some people are going to be upset with me for having Texas A&M not inside the top 3, but I I still think it's an elite team. I just think the league just gets a little bit deeper this year. I think they overachieved last year, but still, this is not a knock on Texas A&M for having them at 4. Um, they get back 4 out of 5 starters, but that one starter they lose, Dexter Dennis, lockdown wing defender, it's a pretty big loss. They bring in Eli Lawrence and Jace Carter to replace him at the wing. I think one of them is going to do really well. But I mean, the past 2 years, this team has finished the same in Ken Palm. It's been 33rd and 33rd. Um, bringing back 4 out of 5 starters, do they maybe jump up to like 20, 25? I could see it, but I don't see the leap from being right outside the top 30 in the country to like top 15. That's kind of expected after finishing second in conference. I think they'll, be right around 20 through 30. Uh, if they overachieve again, maybe they're top 20. But I don't know how they have, they only had what, 2 or 3 losses in the SEC last year. I don't know
Could
how
be.
you repeat that with this league again. So I just feel like they might pick up a few more losses in conference, but still, my gosh, elite team.
Yeah, I mean, I league was strong last year. I think it's stronger this year. Um, Overall, I feel like when I look at just kind of the depth of or I look at a lot of the top teams, but like we said too, there's always a possibility that some of that, there are the unknowns, right? And Missouri kind of became a team that came out of nowhere last season. What if you don't get one of those this year, and maybe you do have those top 4 or 5 teams just completely control everything? I would probably have a hard time right now. And I mentioned earlier I would have Ole Miss at 3 if I did it right now, but I think to me that's there's not much that separates an Ole Miss and an A&M just from my standpoint. Because I think A&M is one of those teams that you give Buzz the benefit of the doubt to at this point. Like you just know he's going to figure it out. He's going to push the right buttons, but I am with you, like the Dexter Dennis replacing that guy in a system like this is very important. And so, but I mentioned when I did the videos, Jace Carter, I think it's just he's a Buzz Williams guy. When I looked at it, I said, that's the guy that Buzz Williams is going to bring in. I think Eli Lawrence can be the same. And then, of course, Wade Taylor, another guy that if you're putting SEC player of the year, to start off, he's right there in the conversation for sure. Tyrese Radford, everybody knows I've always been a big fan of him. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you look at what they have coming back. Yeah, I just it's again, it's hard to move them anywhere, down much further, even if they don't finish second and go 15-3. I couldn't possibly take them probably out of my top 4 right now. I just think they have to be there. And so in some fashion. So all right, Max. So now we move on to the last tier, right? And so again, if you've looked at mine, which I think we've mentioned all the teams that are going to be in here. Max just has one extra, I think, in his. But to me, it did come down to Tennessee and Arkansas and kind of the teams that I see at the very top right now. And I would be shocked if these two teams are not finishing in the top 3 in the SEC somewhere. I just think that, barring injuries, which, unfortunately for Tennessee fans, they're like, that's a big phrase because,
Yeah.
that's something that's carried some weight over the past year or two. But barring injuries and you get a Zakai Ziegler back healthy, and Max knows what I'm going to say because I said it the first time we recorded this, but I can't possibly, project a Vescovy, James, Ziegler type team to finish anywhere outside the top 2 or 3 in the SEC. I just think that they're proven winners. They're older, and I think just that trio, once Ziegler's back, those are 3 guys who will play 35 plus minutes a game, and they should. Now, again, you can talk about injuries and all this other stuff, but if all those guys are healthy, and they've all been injured at some point or another, right, the past season or two or whatever. So if all those guys are healthy, perfect scenario, I would probably put Tennessee at 1. I think just again, that's assuming that all comes together and that's the case because that is a team that just with that nucleus, but then it goes further, right? Then it goes into a Jonas Adu is a year older, and you've got, kind of a guy that just has so much size. Jemai Meshack, who we saw kind of play some important minutes last year when guys were injured. So he's back. Then, you're bringing in Chris Ledlam, you're bringing in Dalton Connect, who I know, there's some excitement about offensively what he could do for them. Jordan Gainey comes in, and you just look at it as a whole. I mean, to me, it's just like, everybody can talk about Rick Barnes all they want in the NCAA tournament, but I mean, they just win games in the regular season. And I would be shocked if this team does not win games. And so I've got Tennessee in the same group with Arkansas, and Arkansas fans, you know what I'm going to say. I mean, I've said it in every, single transfer video I've done this offseason, looking at all these additions. It's the same thing with Muss. It's you give him the benefit of the doubt. He is the king of the transfer portal. There is no one that's worked it better since the transfer era started, which I feel like he kind of started the transfer era, in all honesty, way back at Nevada. The Martin twins coming in, and like I just feel like he was ahead of the curve there, and we talk about it every season. So it's not it's that, right? It's the transfer. Must always does a great job with the transfers. But Max knows where I'm going here too. Devo Davis, Trevon Brazile, those two guys coming back. Davis was just such a huge return, and we've talked about him kind of just Mr. Arkansas, the guy who has just been an absolute Iron Man for them over the past several seasons. But then getting Brazile back, who, if you want to go back and watch our videos from last season, after Maui, during Maui, you can watch Chris and I talk. We were just like gushing over Trevon Brazile. We're like, this guy is going to be top 5 player in the SEC this season. Like, he is about to just go off, and he was doing that at the time. And so getting him back, I think Arkansas, when you look at it from that standpoint, adding a Tremont Mark, I almost forgot to mention him. How could I do that, Max? I said I have to. It's like contractual obligation.
I was waiting for it.
Dennis Gates, Tremont Mark. I have to mention those two guys in every video I do. But I think Mark is going to be fantastic for this team. And then just seeing what what the roles look like for an LLS, Jeremiah Davenport, Khalif Battle, Keon Manyfield, and then getting Mekhi Mitchell back and Jalen Graham, who we know can kind of go off at any time and give them some. Arkansas could be, I guess maybe Arkansas, Kentucky, maybe Ole Miss. I'm talking about deepest teams in the SEC. I think Arkansas has to be right there at the top with those. If it's not them, it's maybe Kentucky, maybe an Ole Miss. But yeah, I just look at this roster and what's not to love. I think they'll be better shooting. I think they'll defend. And they've just got kind of all those pieces to get back to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament and beyond. So,
yeah, surefire top 2 here in the conference.
Yeah.
I'll get to my number 3 in a little bit after I just touch on Tennessee and Arkansas a little bit. But I said it last time we recorded, but Blake nails his Tennessee breakdown. Ziegler, Vescovy, JJJ. It just doesn't get better than that. This team's been top 5 in Ken Palm defense the past 3 years. It's not going anywhere. Gonna have a top 5 defense again. But the problem with Tennessee is they've been stuck in the mud offensively, and I think they finally break that shell. They bring in Chris Ledlum, Connect. The guys they brought in are all can play defense, but are all offensive-minded players. Chris Ledlum averaged 19 a game in the Ivy. The Ivy's a good league. He averaged 19 a game there. They promised him the Grant Williams role. A lot of people have Adu starting at the 4 and Awaka starting at the 5. I think Adu's at the 5 and Ledlum starts at the 4. Ledlum's going to give him double digits per game. I really think that. So I think Tennessee takes that jump from just being that team where if you go play at Tennessee, you're scoring 50, that's been their kind of motto. I think the offense takes a leap this year, and that's why Tennessee is going to be like top 10 team again. And then Arkansas, you nailed it with the depth. They're going to be able to line change like hockey. You're going to be able to send five guys to the scorer's table and just swap lineups. There's going to be no rest. Yeah, Tremont Mark's not getting enough love. I was waiting for you to say Tremont Mark because I knew it was coming. I've said it before in previous videos, but started every game last year for a title contender. It doesn't get any more valuable than that with how golden experience is these days. So yeah, I think surefire top 2 teams, Arkansas, Tennessee, swap them any way you want, but that's 1-2 right there. And then my favorite team in the SEC coming up this next year, no one's higher on them. I absolutely love Ole Miss. I know Blake's got him 3, but I'll put him 2.5.
There you go.
I love this team. And a big reason why is people just aren't giving Chris Beard enough credit as a coach. He's had 8 seasons at the D1 level, and he's only finished outside the top 4 in his conference twice. I mean, he's always top 4. First year at Texas Tech was his first year at a high major. He finished his 7th. And then during the COVID year, he finished his 6th. Okay. Other than that, it's top 4 every year. It's consistency. You know what you're going to get out of this team. You have 2 of the best shot blockers in the country in Cisse and Jamarian Sharp. You're not going to be able to get anything around the rim. And then I think Jamin Breakfield's poised for a huge breakout at the 4. He is dynamic, can switch defensively. Is this team maybe lacking a little bit of shot creation from the point guard position? Are one of these transfers going to pan out there? Maybe, but I think they're going to hold teams to like 50 points a game, and they're not going to really need a bunch of offense. Ole Miss is not being talked enough nationally. this is going to be a top 25 team. Surefire. I without a doubt think this is going to be a top 25 team, but just a step behind Tennessee and Arkansas. I think those two teams are just in a league of their own.
Yeah. I look with Ole Miss getting Matthew Morrell back, I thought was huge because
Huge.
he is someone who can score and can make shots. And it's interesting because like I look around now and I don't know how many teams I'd have to just look at it, but like Ole Miss is one of those teams that can start all seniors or older grad transfers. If you want to put in that, and that's always appealing. I think when you look at it from that standpoint, not by necessity, it's a luxury that they can start, all five because those guys are that good. And so I think when you look at that group, right, of Brakefield, Morrell, Sharp, Cisse, Flanagan, of course, Brandon Murray, I think is a junior, but still, he's probably going to be in there if they have it. But I'm saying they have that option to be able to have five seniors on the floor or older, like I said, at all times. And so that I think is very appealing. And I think, there are other teams that could do that too, whether it's I don't know. I'm sure there are other teams I can look at and see. But it's probably not going to be Kentucky. They're not going to start five seniors. But there are some other teams I think in the SEC can do that. But just being in that option, to have that, I think that's going to be huge. And so you're talking about a team. I feel like every season, this is the obvious choice. I would feel like for most people. But if you're talking about every season we try to identify that team. Okay, who's in the bottom four that could just all of a sudden make that huge jump? It's without question, it's Ole Miss. And Georgia, like I said, I think could make a big jump. I don't think they're making an SEC title type jump. Ole Miss can make an SEC title type jump in one season after going 3-15 in the league. And so I think it's there. I think the potential is certainly there. Missouri was kind of that team last year, right? Went 12-21, I think, the previous season, then wound up being, a top, whatever, 125 game. So made a huge jump. I don't think there's any doubt that if you're circling a team, it's going to be Ole Miss in terms of, and that's again, assuming everyone's eligible, ready to go, get approved waivers, 2 time transfers. But as Max knows, and I always say, it's just, it's NCAA. They're going to, these guys will play. So, yeah. So I think that's where things stand. And again, Max, like I think this was a fun exercise because we know our opinions are going to change on some of these teams as we go throughout, the summer, get closer to the season, and we'll do this again, closer to the year. But I think for now, there's still some roster, pieces to be plugged in, and so it could change our opinion of some of these guys, and and see exactly what we think of these teams. But for now, yeah, this league's going to be pretty good, I think. So
Yeah, really good. One thing I wanted to add about Arkansas, forgot to say, was they're gonna probably be starting a freshman at the five in fall, and there's been just a general consensus knock on freshmen the past year or two just because of how much success teams have had with experience in the transfer portal. But one thing we have seen with freshmen is if they're in that rim protection role, they've actually been very good. Saw it last year with UCLA and a Dembona. They had an
mhm.
amazing defense, amazing. And you saw with UConn and Klingon coming off the bench, just we've seen 7-footers really do well as freshmen in contrast to like a freshman point guard. There might be some questions around if, the freshman can, facilitate the whole offense and, you know, not make freshman mistakes, but you kind of have less of that pressure as a rim protector. So I don't think there's much of that knock with this Arkansas team.
Yeah. I mean, that's, Arkansas fans, I know we're really talking about. It's just we want the front court depth is what they wanted to see. They brought in a lot of guys who can play at guard and wing, but like now that you see the way it's getting Mitchell back, that gives you kind of a boost there. Someone who played
Chandler
minutes. And
Lawson.
yeah, and I think, right, Chandler Lawson comes in. And so it's, I forgot anything. I mentioned him earlier, but I'm like, yeah, he's coming in too. So like you forget sometimes to mention everybody with Arkansas. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options there. And so again, I think probably the deepest team in the SEC. If you're just looking at it from 1 through 10, I think Arkansas is the deepest team in the SEC. And again, credit to Muss and his staff for what they've done with that. But there you go, Max. We did it. 14 teams, and we'll see what order we put them in as we get closer to the season. But for now, that's where we have it. And as always, we'll have you covered here at Southeastern 14, looking at all the SEC basketball offseason notes. We'll start to do some position rankings here soon. So we'll start to break down kind of our picks for top point guards, shooting guards, etc. In the league. So We'll do that here soon enough on the channel. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. All of our football stuff as well. We're doing all of our previews for the upcoming season. You can check out everything we have there. We just finished up our baseball stuff. LSU wins the national championship. So Chris has that covered. Check out everything on the channel here at Southeastern 14. So we appreciate you guys as always. And thanks as always to Max for joining me here. And we will talk to you again here soon at Southeastern.